Good morning, Tar Heel Middle. We're so glad to have you as part of our team. My name is Heather Bobby. I teach ELA 7th grade, and I'm currently working on my master's in reading for secondary students. So today, Ms. Coleman has asked me to provide you with some professional development on literacy terms and assessment terms that we use, or literacy intervention and assessment terms that we use here at Tar Heel Middle. This is also an assignment for my classes. But I'm sharing it with you today at her request, and hopefully we just want everybody to be on the same page as we talk about these different terms over the next year, really. So the first term we're going to look at is assessment, literacy assessment, and that's just the process that we use to gather data about a student's literacy strengths and weaknesses. North Carolina Check-In is one that we administer 3 times a year in math, reading, and science. These assessments offer us data that can inform our instructional choices in the classroom. Whether they're the North Carolina Check-In or just an informal assessment you're doing in your classroom, it doesn't matter. It should inform your choices in the classroom. Reading specialists direct the administration of the North Carolina Check-In within the school. With our help, but they kind of guide us through that process, and then they interpret the data to help us as we try to make really good research-based choices for our instruction. They also can provide teachers with informal assessments they can use in their classroom, like the Smeckens reading inventory that we use with our reluctant readers, just to help them find high interest material, because often they don't know what kind of book they would like. So this is a good way to get started and help them through that journey and process. Middle school students need to know the goals and the purpose of assessments. They need it explained to them in an age-appropriate way. And when they do, research shows that these students are more willing to put forth their best effort, which is going to give us better data. So it's a very important part of the process of assessment is to make sure we're communicating with the student the why and the what behind that test and that assessment. Language assessments are a measure of a student's competency within a specific spoken language. We do this often because 51% of students with a language impairment also have deficiencies in reading and writing. So if we can identify that language impairment, we can help improve the reading and writing goals. We use Access language assessment with our ELL students. Your students will be pulled out about twice a year for that. It's administered by our ELL and migrant teachers. Classroom teachers can use these oral language assessments to guide us as we make instructional strategies and as we choose interventions that we're going to use in our classroom for those specific students who are struggling. For example, our ELL students who come back and we realize they have a deficiency in vocabulary, we need to make sure as content and ELA teachers that we're giving that prefix, suffix, and root word instruction in vocabulary to help them so that they can then transfer that learning as they learn new words with the same, word parts. Reading specialists can help teachers determine what kind of testing is needed. So you have a student is struggling, I think it's language impairment. Okay, go to your reading specialist with observation and some informal assessments. The two of you together can determine what is needed. The reading specialist can reach out to other professionals like speech pathologists when needed. And with any assessment, language assessment especially, because this can be touchy for kids who are struggling in this area, especially in middle school, we want to make sure they have a clear understanding of how that assessment is going to benefit them and help them reach their learning goals. And then they're going to be more willing to be involved in that process. Diagnostic tests are a standardized test that assess students' specific strengths and weaknesses in reading and writing. We use iReady Diagnostic 3 times a year in math and reading at Tar Heel. The reading test, the proficiency of students in the basic literacy components of phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, as well as digging into the minutia of the North Carolina Standards Course of Study for ELA. I iReady provides teachers with a really awesome tool in that it creates instructional groupings for students based on their test results. So it really makes that process really smooth for teachers as they're trying to look at who to pull into what group. Diagnostics tests in general give teachers a great targeted remediation for students. We know exactly where their gaps are, and then we can go and find those remediation strategies that are targeted specifically to those deficiencies. Your reading specialist often will pull the students who have literacy competencies like the phonics, phonemic awareness, and fluency, pull them into small group or individualized instruction. And they can also give some other diagnostic testing that if it's needed, they can do those assessments for us. As we're doing the iReady diagnostic or any diagnostic, you want to pull kids in and pre-conference with them, explain to them the point. With iReady, we want to look at past scores. We want to look at what our goals were for this test, remind students of those goals that they have set. And then post-test, we want to look at, did we meet our goals? If we did, great, let's celebrate. If we didn't, what do we need to do next to make sure we reach our goals next time? Talk through those things with the students. Bring them into the process, bring them into the decision making, and they're going to be much more likely to buy in. And we want to remind them that you can't fail a diagnostic test. We're just assessing what they know. The word test is a little bit deceiving and it kind of scares them. So remind them that it's not a test you can fail. You either know it or you don't, and it's okay. When we see you don't, we fill that gap with good instruction strategies and things like that to help you make that growth. Remediation is where we go once we have our data. It is the reteaching of content when a majority of our students don't reach mastery. So as a teacher assesses students' progress and realize that they're not understanding, they're going to adjust, they're going to change strategies, they're going to try a new approach. And once we brought the majority to mastery, now we're going to look at the few that still need some help, and we're going to provide them with some interventions. But a great tool for determining mastery of writing concepts is the rubric. So after applying a rubric to summaries, a teacher realizes that her students can only find one supporting detail, and it's time to reteach because they've got to be able in 7th grade, the standard is they've got to find 2. So we've got to reteach that and make sure that the majority of our students are mastering that concept, how to do that. Now, your reading specialist is a great resource for teachers when it's time to find a new strategy because what you did didn't work. So maybe you hit a wall and you're like, I don't know what to do next. So that reading specialist is going to be a great place to go to get some new research-based strategies that you can try in your classroom. And most reading specialists are willing to model that for you. If it's one you don't know, you've never heard of, they're going to go in and model that strategy for you or give you some good professional development on how to use that strategy in your classroom. As with assessments, students need to understand the reason behind remediation. So we've got to make sure we clearly communicate to them why we're remediating, why are we redoing this, and explain to them how that is going to help them and be a benefit to their own learning goals. And they're going to be more likely to participate and engage with the remediation than if we don't explain that to them. Intervention is another level of support that we provide to students. Reading and writing intervention is informed by our assessments. They identify the specific weaknesses that students have, and we can address them for that individual students. This is how we differentiate for them. So for example, 5 of your ELL students' essays showed that they don't know how to use coordinating conjunctions because they've used them wrong through the whole essay. So now the teacher can go to quill.org, which is a program we have here at Tar Heel, and they can find a unit that teaches through how to use coordinating conjunctions and push that out to those 5 students. Now they've provided them with a Tier 1 intervention within the classroom. And hopefully that's what they need to master that concept. Students who are given Tier 1 interventions in the classroom and make sufficient progress, mastery, they're good. They don't need further interventions. Reading specialists work with the support team, with the RTI team to develop intervention plans for students. And they help identify research-based practices that are going to help those students the most. And often they will provide that tier 2 and tier 3 intervention for students in small group or individualized. Middle school students who are reading below grade level are often frustrated and they know they need help. So when they are offered help and it's explained to them how this help, how these strategies are going to help them specifically, they often are willing to engage, and many times they're eager for it. Students' efficacy has an effect size of 0.92 on student learning. So drawing them in and helping them buy into what you're doing is really going to affect how well they do with the intervention. So explaining them the strategy that you're using and the validity of the strategy is an important step in this process. So after we've implemented our remediation and we've done our assessments, we've remediated, we've done interventions. As we're doing that, we've got a progress monitor. And progress monitoring is just a process we use for determining if what we're doing is working. Is the remediation working? If it's not, okay, now we're gonna move to interventions. And are the interventions that we're using working? If not, then we've got to rethink it. Rubrics, again, are an effective form of progress monitoring for writing interventions. Teachers can use a variety of formal and informal assessments to do progress monitoring. Progress monitoring informs our decisions about whether or not we're going to continue the intervention or discontinue it because the learning goals have been achieved. And it also tells us if the intervention is working or not. If it's not working, we got to go and find a new intervention and try something else because that one's not working for whatever reason. We got to figure it out using progress monitoring. Reading specialists can provide direct progress monitoring, especially for those low performing students they're working with on an individual basis. They can do that through formal and informal assessments as well as in class observations. And they can collaborate with teachers to devise a plan for how the teacher is going to do progress monitoring in the classroom. Sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming, and your reading specialist can help you boil that down into a process that's going to be workable. Middle school students are probably the most important piece of progress monitoring. In fact, self-reported grades have an effect size of 1.33 on student learning. So allowing our students to self-report on their progress is going to encourage them to self-reflect and identify areas for improvement. It's also going to be a great encouragement to them as they realize, wow, I've mastered that. This thing that I've struggled with, I've made progress. This has worked. So that's going to encourage them to keep moving forward in those interventions and remediations that we're doing. And it's going to help them again to buy in and to be willing to be part of that process. So we've got assessments, we've got our remediation, our interventions, and then we've got our progress monitoring. Those are the three big components of helping students make the growth that we need to see as we move through this year and we shoot for that, moving our school into that growth, having made growth at the end of the year when we look at those final test scores. So I hope that's helpful to you. I hope we're all on the same page now. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to working with you this year.